A warrant officer is an officer in a military organization who is designated an officer by a warrant, as distinguished from a commissioned officer who is designated an officer by a commission, and a non-commissioned officer who is designated an officer often by virtue of seniority. The rank was first used in the English Royal Navy and is today used in most services in many countries, including the Commonwealth nations and the United States. Outside the United States, warrant officers are included in the other ranks category, equivalent to the US E category in rank between non-commissioned officers and commissioned officers. The warrant officers in Commonwealth navies rank between Chief Petty Officer and Sub-Lieutenant. In Commonwealth Air Forces between Flight Sergeant and Pilot Officer, and in Commonwealth Armies between Staff Sergeant and Second Lieutenant. Warrant officers in the United States are classified as officers and are in the W category. They are technical leaders and specialists. Chief warrant officers are commissioned by the President of the United States and take the same oath as regular commissioned officers. They may be technical experts with a long service as enlisted personnel, or direct entrance, notably for U.S. Army helicopter pilots. Origins in the Royal Navy. The Warrant Officer Corps began in the 13th century in the nascent English Royal Navy. At the time, noblemen with military experience took command of the new navy, adopting the military ranks of lieutenant and captain. These officers often had no knowledge of life on board a ship, let alone how to navigate such a vessel, and relied on the expertise of the ship's master and other seamen who tended to the technical aspects of running the ship. As cannon came into use, the officers also required gunnery experts. Specialist gunners began to appear in the 16th century and also had warrant officer status. Literacy was one thing that most warrant officers had in common, and this distinguished them from the common seamen. According to the Admiralty regulations, no person shall be appointed to any station in which he is to have charge of stores, unless he can read and write, and is sufficiently skilled in arithmetic to keep an account of them correctly. Since all warrant officers had responsibility for stores, this was enough to debar the illiterate. Rank and status in the 18th century. In origin, warrant officers were specialist professionals whose expertise and authority demanded formal recognition. In the 18th century they fell into two clear categories. On the one hand, those privileged to share with the commissioned officers in the wardroom and on the quarterdeck, and on the other, those who ranked with more junior members of the ship's crew. Somewhere between the two, however, were the standing officers, notable because, unlike the rest of the ship's company, they remained with the ship even when it was out of commission. In these circumstances they were under the pay and supervision of the Royal Dockyard. Wardroom warrant officers. These classes of warrant officer messed in the wardroom with the commissioned officers, the master, the senior warrant officer, a qualified navigator and experienced seaman who set the sails, maintained the ship's log and advised the captain on the seaworthiness of the ship and crew. The surgeon, who treated the sick and injured and advised the captain on matters of health. The purser, responsible for supplies, victuals and pay for the crew. In the early 19th century, they were joined in the wardroom by naval chaplains, who also had warrant officer status. Standing warrant officers. The standing officers were the boatswain, responsible for maintenance of the ship's boats, sails, rigging, anchors and cables. The carpenter, responsible for maintenance of the ship's hull and masts. The gunner, responsible for care and maintenance of the ship's guns and gunpowder. Junior warrant officers. Other warrant officers included surgeons' mates, boatswains' mates and carpenters' mates, sailmakers, armories, schoolmasters and clerks. Masters-at-arms, who had formerly overseen small arms provision on board, had by this time taken on responsibility for discipline. Warrant officers in context. By the end of the century, the rank structure could be illustrated as follows. Demise of the Royal Naval Warrants. In 1843, the wardroom warrant officers were given commissioned status, while in 1853 the lower-grade warrant officers were absorbed into the new rate of Chief Petty Officer, both classes thereby ceasing to be warrant officers. On 25 July 1864 the standing warrant officers were divided into two grades, warrant officers and chief warrant officers. By the time of the First World War, the ranks had been expanded with the adoption of modern technology in the Navy to include telegraphists, electricians, shipwrights, artificer engineers, etc. Both warrant officers and commissioned warrant officers messed in the warrant officers' mess rather than the wardroom. Warrant officers and commissioned warrant officers also carried swords, were saluted by ratings and rank between sub-lieutenants and midshipmen. In 1949, the ranks of warrant officer and commissioned warrant officer were changed to commissioned officer and senior commissioned officer, the latter ranking with but after the rank of lieutenant, and they were admitted to the wardroom. The warrant officers' mess is closing down. Collectively, these officers were known as branch officers, being retitled Special Duties Officers in 1956. In 1998, the Special Duties list was merged with the general list of officers in the Royal Navy, all officers now having the same opportunity to reach the highest commissioned ranks. Modern usage. Australia. The Australian Army has 3 warrant officer ranks, WO, WO1 and WO2. The most senior Army warrant officer is the soldier-appointed regimental sergeant major of the Army. The RSMA is the only holder of the unique rank of warrant officer, introduced in 1991. Substantive RSMs of regiments and battalions hold the rank Warrant Officer Class 1. Distinct from RSMs, WO1 is also reserved for senior soldiers of technical trades, such as Artificer Sergeant Major. The third rank is Warrant Officer Class 2. The insignia of the 3 ranks are a crown for WO2, the Commonwealth coat of arms for WO1, and the Commonwealth coat of arms surrounded by a laurel wreath for the warrant officer. The Royal Australian Navy rank of Warrant Officer is the Navy's only rank appointed by warrant and is equivalent to the Army's WO1. The most senior non-commissioned member of the Navy is the Warrant Officer appointed Warrant Officer of the Navy. The Royal Australian Air Force rank of Warrant Officer is the Air Force's only rank appointed by warrant and is equivalent to both the Army's WO1 and the Navy's WO. The most senior non-commissioned member is the Warrant Officer appointed Warrant Officer of the Air Force. France. The ranks of adjutant, adjutant-chef, and major may be considered equivalent to Commonwealth Warrant Officer ranks. Indonesia. In the Indonesian Armed Forces, there are 2 Warrant Officer ranks known as Pembantu Lieutenant. These are Warrant Officer Second Class and Warrant Officer First Class. India. Junior commissioned officers of the Indian Armed Forces equivalent of Warrant Officer ranks. Israel Defense Forces. The Rav Nagad Mishni and the Rav Nagad are both non-commissioned officers ranks in the Israel Defense Forces. Because the IDF is an integrated force, they have a unique rank structure. Israel Defense Forces ranks are the same in all services. The ranks are derived from those of the paramilitary Haganah developed in the British Mandate of Palestine period to protect the Yishuv. This origin is reflected in the slightly compacted IDF rank structure. New Zealand. The New Zealand Army is similar to the Australian Army, except that it has two warrant officer ranks. The Warrant Officer Class 2, which is addressed as Sergeant Major, and the Warrant Officer Class 1, which is addressed as Sir Ma'am. There are also appointments such as Company and Squadron Sergeant Major, which are usually WO2 positions, and Regimental Sergeant Major, which are usually WO1 positions. The highest-ranking WO1 holds the position of Sergeant Major of the Army and is addressed as Sir Ma'am. In certain uniforms, WO2s wear black shoes, the same as the enlisted ranks, whilst WO1s wear brown shoes, the same as commissioned officers. The exception to this are WO1s of the Royal New Zealand Armoured Corps, who wear black shoes. The Royal New Zealand Navy has a single warrant officer rank and is addressed as Sir Ma'am. The WO is equivalent to the Army WO1. The Royal New Zealand Air Force also has a single warrant officer rank and is addressed as Sir Ma'am. The WO is equivalent to the Navy WO and the Army WO1. Singapore. In the Singapore Armed Forces, warrant officers begin as third warrant officers, previously starting at 2WO. This rank is given to former specialists who have attained the rank of Master Sergeant and have either gone through, or are about to go through, the Warfighter course at the Specialist and Warrant Officer Advanced School in the Specialist and Warrant Officer Institute. In order to be promoted to a second warrant officer and above, they must have been selected for and graduated from the Joint Warrant Officer course at the SAF Warrant Officer School. Warrant officers rank between specialists and commissioned officers. They ordinarily serve as battalion or brigade regimental sergeant majors. Many of them serve as instructors and subject matter experts in various training establishments. Warrant officers are also seen on the various staffs headed by the respective specialist officers. There are 6 grades of warrant officer. Warrant officers used to have their own mess. For smaller camps, this mess are combined with the officers' mess as a combined mess for better camaraderie. Warrant officers have similar responsibilities to commissioned officers. Warrant officers are usually addressed as Sir by the other ranks or as Warrant. They are also usually addressed Ensign by commissioned officers. It is not a necessity to be saluted by other ranks. They would usually be saluted out of respect by the enlistees. South Africa. In the South African National Defence Force, a warrant officer is a non-commissioned officer rank. Before 2008 there were 2 classes, Warrant Officer Class 1 and 2. A Warrant Officer Class 1 could be appointed to positions such as Regimental Sergeant Major, Formation Sergeant Major, or even Sergeant Major of the Army while still in the rank of Warrant Officer Class 1. In 2008 the warrant officer ranks were expanded so that the substantive ranks that came with senior appointments now became ranks that an individual kept after moving from that post. United Kingdom Royal Navy. In 1973, warrant officers reappeared in the Royal Navy, but these appointments followed the Army model, with the new warrant officers being ratings rather than officers. They were initially known as Fleet Chief Petty Officers but were renamed Warrant Officers in the 1980s. They rank with Warrant Officers Class 1 in the British Army and Royal Marines and with Warrant Officers in the Royal Air Force. There are executive warrant officers for commands and ships. 5 branches each have a command warrant officer. The senior RNWO is the warrant officer of the Naval Service. From 2004, warrant officers Class 2 existed in the RN, but no new appointments have been made since 2014. British Army. In the British Army, there are 2 warrant ranks, Warrant Officer Class 2 and Warrant Officer Class 1, the latter being the senior of the 2. It used to be more common to refer to these ranks as WOII and WOI. Warrant Officer First Class or Second Class is incorrect. The rank immediately below WO2 is Staff Sergeant. From 1938 to 1940 there was a WO3 Platoon Sergeant Major rank. Starting March 2015, the new appointment, Sergeant Major of the Army, or Army Sergeant Major for the British Army due to the reforms of the British Army, was created. Earlier in the year the appointments for Command Sergeant Majors commenced. Royal Marines. Before 1879, the Royal Marines had no warrant officers. By the end of 1881, the Royal Marines had given warrant rank to the sergeant majors and some other senior non-commissioned officers, in a similar fashion to the Army. When the Army introduced the ranks of Warrant Officer Class 1 and Class 2 in 1915, the Royal Marines did the same shortly after. From February 1920, Royal Marines Warrant Officers Class 1 were given the same status as Royal Navy Warrant Officers, and the rank of Warrant Officer Class 2 was abolished in the Royal Marines. With no further promotions to this rank, the Marines had introduced Warrant Officers equivalent in status to the Royal Navies from 1910, with the Royal Marines Gunner, equivalent to the Navy's warrant rank of Gunner. Development of these ranks closely paralleled that of the naval counterparts. As in the Royal Navy, by the Second World War there were warrant officers and commissioned warrant officers, commissioned staff sergeant majors, Royal Marines gunners, commissioned Royal Marines gunners, etc. As officers they were saluted by junior ranks in the Royal Marines and the Army. These all became branch officer ranks in 1949, and special duties officer ranks in 1956. These ranks would return in 1972, this time similar to their Army counterparts, and not as the RN did before. The most senior Royal Marine Warrant Officer is the Corps Regimental Sergeant Major. Unlike the RN proper, it retains both WO ranks. Royal Air Force. The Royal Air Force first used the ranks of Warrant Officer Class 1 and 2 as inherited from the Royal Flying Corps. It first used the rank badges of the Royal Coat of Arms for WOI and the Crown for WOII. Until the 1930s, these ranks were often known as Sergeant Major First and Second Class. In 1939, the RAF abolished the rank of WOII and retained just the WOI rank, referred to as just Warrant Officer, which it remains to this day. The RAF has no equivalent to WO2, and RAF WO being equivalent to WO1 and wearing the same badge of rank, the Royal Coat of Arms. The correct way to address a warrant officer is Sir or Ma'am by airmen and Mr. a warrant officer surname by officers. Most RAF warrant officers do not hold appointments as in the Army or Royal Marines. The exception to this is the stationed warrant officer, who is considered a first amongst equals on a RAF station. Warrant officer is the highest non-commissioned rank and ranks above flight sergeant. In 1946, the RAF renamed its aircrew warrant officers to master aircrew, a designation which still survives. In 1950, it renamed warrant officers in technical traits to master technicians, a designation which survived only until 1964. The most senior RAF warrant officer by appointment is the Chief of the Air Staff's Warrant Officer. He holds the same rank as all other warrant officers. United States. In the United States military, a warrant officer is ranked as an officer above the senior most enlisted ranks, as well as officer cadets and officer candidates, but below the officer grade of O1. Warrant officers are highly skilled, single-track specialty officers, and while the ranks are authorized by Congress, each Each branch of the U.S. Armed Forces selects, manages, and utilizes warrant officers in slightly different ways. For appointment to warrant officer, a warrant is approved by the Service Secretary of the respective branch of service, while chief warrant officers are commissioned by the President of the United States. Both warrant officers and chief warrant officers take the same oath of office as regular commissioned officers. Warrant officers command detachments, units, activities, vessels, aircraft, and armored vehicles, as well as lead, coach, train, and counsel subordinates. However, the warrant officer's primary task as a leader is to serve as a technical expert, providing valuable skills, guidance, and expertise to commanders and organizations in the particular field. All U.S. Armed Services employ warrant officer grades except the U.S. Air Force. Although still technically authorized, the Air Force discontinued appointing new warrant officers in 1959, retiring its last chief warrant officer from the Air Force Reserve in 1992. The U.S. Army utilizes warrant officers heavily and separates them into two types: technical and aviation. Army aviation warrant officers are Army aviators. Technical warrant officers in the Army are specialized in a single-track technical area such as intelligence, maintenance, or military police, and provide direct advice and support to commanders. For example, a military police officer and a military intelligence officer both have to be branch qualified in the respective fields, learning how to manage the entire spectrum of the profession. However, within those broad fields you can also have warrant officers such as SID special agents and counterintelligence special agents. These technical warrant officers allow for a soldier with subject matter expertise but with the authority of a full commissioned officer. Both technical and aviation warrants go through similar training initially at warrant officer candidate school, but then go the separate ways. Technical warrant officers in the Army must be selected from the non-commissioned officer ranks. However, the higher the rank, the easier it is to pass the board and get accepted into the warrant officer program. Aviation warrant officers are able to apply before becoming non-commissioned officers. The U.S. Navy and U.S. Coast Guard also discontinued the grade of W1 in 1975, appointing and commissioning all new entrants as Chief Warrant Officer 2. Unlike the Army, all Navy Chief Warrant Officers are selected strictly from the Chief Petty Officer pay grades. The Coast Guard allows E6 personnel to apply for Chief Warrant Officer rank, but only after they have displayed the technical ability by earning a placement in the top 50% on the annual eligibility list for advancement to E7. The U.S. Maritime Service, which is established at 46 U.S. Code Section 51701, falls under the authority of the Maritime Administration of the Department of Transportation and is authorized to appoint warrant officers. In accordance with 46 U.S. Code Section 51701, the USMS rank structure must be the same as that of the U.S. Coast Guard, while uniforms worn are those of the U.S. Navy with distinctive USMS insignia and devices. The USMS has appointed warrant officers of various specialty fields during and after World War II. Warrant officer rank is also occasionally used in law enforcement agencies to grant status and pay to certain senior specialist officers who are not in command, such as senior technicians or helicopter pilots. As in the armed forces, they rank above sergeants but below lieutenants. For example, the North Carolina State Highway Patrol had several warrant officer helicopter pilot positions from the 1960s until the mid-1980s. The WO insignia was a silver bar with a black square in the center. The WO ranks were abolished when the aviation program expanded and nearly 20 trooper pilot positions were created designated. The New York State Police rank of technical lieutenant is similar to a warrant officer rank insofar as it is used to grant commissioned officer authority to non-commissioned officers with extensive technical expertise.